I'm Steve Reagan with CSO Online, and I'm sitting with the president of Recovery Point, Mark Langer. And today we're going to talk about resiliency. I guess I want to start by saying, when it comes to recovery and preparedness, what are some of the basic questions customers need to ask their vendor?
Well, it probably depends on what kind of customer they are. Mm-hmm. So in general, the market breaks down into two segments. Pure Intel-based, Intel Linux, Wintel systems, which are generally using cloud-based recovery services, and then large, heterogeneous, complex environments, which would consist of Intel services likely, but also mainframe, AIX, iSeries, HPUX, Sun, Oracle. And the questions that you ask are different because the risks are different. In the case of a cloud-based recovery, the questions one would ask are capacity, experience, but there's a plethora. I mean, there are probably 500 recovery vendors doing that.
So sticking with them first, aside from the experience and capacity and things like this, what are some of the pitfalls that customers are falling into because they didn't ask the right questions? Like if they were to, outside of those two, if they were going to focus on something, what do you advise?
I think you have to first determine what your own technical capabilities are and whether you're looking for a self-service solution in which the vendor is merely providing you IaaS infrastructure, remote compute network, or if you need what's described today as DRaaS, disaster recovery as a service. And I think that what I have seen people have struggled with is that they thought that what they needed was self-service, and when they attempt to go do it, they struggle with it. So I think the first fork in the road is, am I a self-service, highly self-sufficient customer that really needs nothing but the physical and electronic resources to recover, or am I a customer looking for someone to assist me and take a managed approach to that? Disaster recovery as a service, if you look at Gartner's definition, is by definition a managed service. So you're looking at a vendor and you're saying, this is a problem, I need you to solve it, and I need you to be integral to the process to solve it, as opposed to the self-service customer who says, I have all the resources and technical know-how, I have the depth of staff, I have multiple locations, so if one is down, I'm confident that I have the resources in another to reach out into the cloud and recover it. The professional services required to do it. So I would say that's the first question is, what kind of customer am I?
So when it comes to like recovery options, is it a thing to where each individual organization needs to weigh their priorities on response and speed and everything, or is there a standard metric, like a baseline? No? No,
there are two standard terms that are then applied uniquely to each customer. It's the recovery point objective and the recovery time objective. And so just like it was in the old days when it was traditional hot site services, in the DRaaS world, whether it's self-service or whether it's DRaaS, you first have to establish what's my recovery time objective and what's my recovery point objective. And you don't want to buy something that exceeds that because you're now spending money that exceeds your minimum needs. So the first thing that everybody should do is, and this is time consuming and oftentimes it's short-circuited, but you look at a business impact analysis and you say, what are my risks? How long can they be down? You look at the applications that are most critical, you tier them in terms of how long they can be down, and then you look from those applications to the hardware and software that supports them, and you build a matrix to it. You say, now that's my tier 1, that's tier 2, and tier 3. And in a simple Intel-driven environment, they're all in the same systems in general, but if you have a complex heterogeneous environment, then they're interconnected among many other systems. And from that, you derive the recovery time and point objectives that you have, and then you look for solutions that will allow you to do that for as little money as possible.
So that's how you would do it with the little customers. Now, what if the customer is a big enterprise? What are the questions they need to be asking?
It's really a different set of questions. A large enterprise is going to have a heterogeneous environment. It's not going to be simply driven by Intel. And when we say the little customer, there are some very large customers who are simply Intel driven. And so it's not to suggest that it's only small customers that can do that. But typically, a financial institution, insurance company, a complex customer is going to be running applications on mainframe, on iSeries, on AIX, HPUX, Oracle. And those are all interconnected, and they all talk to each other. So to deliver the result to the user or the customer, all those systems have to come up. And that's a very, very different arrangement because the mechanisms to do that are the vendor options to do that are very limited. If you said how many vendors are there in the country that can recover Intel and Linux and some small alterations of that, hundreds. How many meet the cut for Forrester and Gartner? Probably 20 each. But if you said how many vendors are there in the country that recover mainframe, AIX, Intel, HPUX, and all these things that combine together in a complex environment, there are 3. And so the risks attendant to who you choose and the diversity of choices that you have are very different. The biggest risk is that those, let me back up a second. If someone said to us, I have unlimited money, I have a very complex environment, what should I do? The answer would be you should not use another vendor. You should buy 100% duplicate environment of what you have, place it in a remote location, in a co-location facility that's rated for concurrent maintenance, put a big network in between, and replicate all the data and be ready to recover on a moment's notice everything that you have. And that's actually the very best solution, and whenever people have the money to do that, they should do that. The problem is that it's very, very expensive, and very few customers, even a lot of big banks and others, find it challenging to be able to afford that secondary installation, tens if not hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment sitting idle. Now, oftentimes it's used for test and development and other things, but at the end of the day, it's a secondary data center. It's a very expensive solution. So when you can't do that, then you have to find a way to marry up dedicated data storage in another location, typically with vendors' assets in the cloud or physical. And the challenge for that is that in the old days, when things were tape-based, vendors would store tapes. Other vendors would recover the operations, and when the customer had an emergency, the customer would call the tape storage vendor and say, take my tapes, bring them to what was called the hot site, and they'll recover there. And if the hot site was busy and couldn't accommodate them, it could be moved to another location of that vendor. And that actually worked in the old days because it was largely mainframe-centric, and it was a delayed recovery, but it wasn't a failed recovery. So now you fast forward today to where a delayed recovery is a catastrophic recovery. A delayed recovery is a failure. And you can't recover from tape that way. So customers are all recovering from online services, whether they're virtual media or whether they're SAN replication or any derivation of those. The first key is that data needs to be at the location that you're going to recover at. It has to be where you're going to recover because there's no time to get it there. And so the risk now is that if I migrate my data persistently to another location, and that location doesn't have the room, the network, the infrastructure for any reason, gives me the old-fashioned answer, which is, well, we're busy, can you send you here? I have no recovery.
Mark, thanks again. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
My name is Steve Reagan. If you'd like to learn more about resiliency, check us out at cso19.com.